Hello there, my name is Sam Young. I'm thrilled to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about harnessing hidden potential, empowering twice exceptional students beyond traditional classrooms. So let's dive in. First, we are going to start with a little story. Now, we're going to start with the story of two boys at the turn of the 20th century in England. So these are young boys, and for those of you who are not sure about the century stuff, this is going into the 1900s and the end of the 1800s. Okay. Our first boy was considered a disappointment in the eyes of his family and teachers. His school reports were filled with blunt critiques. One teacher labeled him as lazy. He was frequently described as unfocused and undisciplined. His father's disapproval was just as sharp. His father wrote that his son was slovenly, happy-go-lucky, harum-scarum, which I sometimes miss these old insults, writing that his son's life was going to be not so great as he was going to end up a social wastrel destined for unpleasant and pointless life, right? This idea of this boy is kind of seeming grim, but educators and mentors in his life, as well as his own family, seeing that this boy's stubbornness and restless energy are deficits. Right? These are things that are problems and are going to make it unlikely for him to succeed. And I want you to think about not only having that experience as a young boy from a parent, but also as an educator. Certainly doesn't feel good. Let's take a look at our second boy here. The future looks somewhat bleak for our first. The second boy grew up not so far away. They both attended the same school, was known for his unyielding spirit, praised for courage and the ability to continue in the face of adversity. He was known to demonstrate commitment and unwavering determination. He felt as if someone that was maybe a natural leader, and it would seem as if this boy's bright future was going to shine so bright, right? Our first boy, sort of this grim, not looking so great future. Our second boy with this ability to have this sort of relentless perseverance, indomitable spirit, and all of these traits. Um, to twist things up a little bit, the two boys are the same. That once disruptive child whose father worried he'd amount to nothing grew up to become Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill is one of the most iconic and resilient leaders from the 20th century, no doubt from Great Britain's history. What his father and teachers had seen as deficits became the very strengths that defined his legacy, right? And this story challenges us to rethink the way that we see traits. Sometimes we may perceive something as a weakness when the only thing that changes is the context that the person is in, right? So I want you to keep this in mind as we go on. Winston Churchill doesn't necessarily change, the context and times do. And that's very true for our students. This brings us to why we're here today, right? We have these bright, clever kiddos who are super complex and they have great strengths and struggle areas. And it's often the struggles that stand out to us, right? They're struggling to do the things we ask. They're struggling to turn in work. They're struggling to maybe feel good about themselves and get things done, right? And it's really frustrating because you have these kids that are so bright and they often know they're so bright and they struggle to get things done, right? They need us. And this leads to our big question for the day. How can we focus on what they're good at and help our kids lead strength-based and talent-driven lives? Friends, that's why we're here today. That's our exact essential question. So we're going to be using that to drive us through the conversation. Now, before we go any further, let me just say a little bit about me. So you know, who is this person I'm listening to? Just quickly, I am a former Bridges Academy educator, and Bridges was the first school in the world to teach twice exceptional students. And I spent about 10 years there and also went to their graduate school. I then left and started a virtual enrichment program that offers strength-based courses and community and camps for twice exceptional and gifted students. So the whole idea is like talent development. That's why we're here today. Identifying strengths. That's why we're here today. And helping them live strength-based lives. That's why we're here today and belong. Additionally, I have some other stuff, not as exciting. Two-time Fulbright scholar, and I've done a TEDx talk, keynoted, and I'm also a neurodivergent person myself. Now let's move on. Little roadmap of where we're going to go today. First, we're going to go down our first pathway, the hidden potential, right? Understanding what does twice exceptionality mean, the importance of strengths and talents. Number two, we're going to talk about finding hidden potential. How does one then find strengths that we've already talked about being important? And number three, how can we empower our students beyond the classroom to develop these strengths and live strength-based lives? So let's jump in. Starting with number one, this is the hidden potential part and figuring out Well, some key definitions. So before we go explore strengths, it's really important we're sort of on the same page about some of these key words. So the first word that we really need to talk about is twice exceptional, right? It's in the title. And there are many different definitions out there. This is the one that I tend to use. It's from my mentor, Dr. Susan Baum. And again, this is perhaps a complex, maybe this is the first time you've heard the term twice exceptional, but twice exceptional individuals evidence exceptional ability and disability. So they have this kind of spiky profile, high, high, low, low, which results in a unique set of circumstances where their ability might dominate their disability and hide it. So they might seem as just gifted. Additionally, their disability might dominate and hide their ability. So they might seem as learning differenced or learning disabled. Or, the most difficult of all, each may mask each other so that neither is recognized or addressed. And that is the most challenging profile. So I want you to think about a student who, for example, is maybe highly verbal, really creative or artistic, and then simultaneously has ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, dyscalculia, dyslexia, anxiety, etc. Right? You have this sort of high, high and this low, low. And typically when we think about, students who are gifted, we think about them being on a continuum, on a bell curve, right? And when we think about 2E students, twice exceptional students, they have a foot firmly planted on both ends of the bell curve, right? Where here, maybe 2 standard deviations over in the struggle area, and then we're over here, maybe 2 standard deviations over in the strength area. And it's this complex coexistence that makes up our kiddos, that makes up this profile. So little side story here. For my visual people, I like to have lots of visuals like you just saw. In Dr. Susan Baum's book, the one who we just saw giving us that definition, she wrote a book way back when, before there was even a term twice exceptional, called To Be Gifted and Learning Disabled. And in this book, she gives us this fantastic visual. She says, our students are comprised of distinguishing strengths, so these are their strong areas, and complex challenges, their struggle areas, right? Their strengths are yellow, their struggles are blue, and here's the kicker, they are always green. These students are always green. They are always a combination, just like Winston Churchill, of these same traits. The only difference is that they're going to struggle in certain places and be strong in certain places, and that has to do with everything that we're talking about today. Quick side story. When I first started my little enrichment program, I was not an entrepreneur, right? I was a teacher for 15 years, and then I left and started a program. And I asked a friend of mine, hey, can you help me? He's a graphic artist. And he said, sure. I said, I'm teaching these kids. They're called twice exceptional. Here's what it means. By the way, I think you're twice exceptional, but I didn't say that. And I said, can you help me, please? Can you help me make this logo? And he came back with this. And I want you to see this because this hits on 2 levels. Okay. Number one, it's the colors, right? It's the colors. You can see the blue on the edges, right? The struggle areas. And you can see the yellow. And then you have this entire experience of this green reality, right? And there's another level too. And I want you to pause here for a moment and think about this. There's a phrase that we use a lot to describe our kiddos, right? And it has to do with shapes. So if you want to hit pause and sort of think for a moment, please do so. Okay, if you're coming back to me now, we often say our kiddos are what? A square peg in a round hole. And I kid you not, I did not ask for this and I'm blown away, but this is that, right? And look, the yellow sticks out. So one big takeaway for today, if we go no further, is that we want to help our students develop their strengths. We want to help them not round out. We don't want to round students out. We want to help them sharpen their edges, right? And as a society, we celebrate individuals who have exceptional strengths. But a lot of times in education, we're pressured to sort of focus on like rounding students out and making them a little bit good at everything. All right, let's move on. To put this in really absurd context, I want you to think about a world in which Superman never becomes Superman. A world in which Superman never stops runaway trains or never stands up to Lex Luthor, right? All because he's getting over his quote unquote kryptonite allergy, right? I want you to imagine that, like the absurdity of that, right? That would be miserable. Superman is super because of his strengths. He just happens to have like one challenge area. But the sad reality is that we do this to ourselves all the time, right? We focus so much on our strengths and what we're not doing, and we focus on the things that we need to fix and improve. And so many of us have these superpowers and talents and strength, and we spend most of our lives focusing on fixing. So this whole conversation is about the opposite of that, the antidote to that, inoculating that, and creating a strength-based life for our kiddos. Put even better by one of my favorite educational psychologists, Dr. Joseph Renzulli, no one cares about Picasso's ability to do complex math or Einstein's ability to paint. So why are we so concerned with everyone being good at the same thing? It's our job to help students to identify their strengths and then lead these fruitful lives. And it's our job to focus on what they're good at and help them get better, not what they're not. Okay. So before we go any further, I'm going to read two descriptions of two different students, and I'd like you to form an opinion, an impression as we go. So the first one, unreliable, disorganized, overwhelmed, talented, creative, hardworking. Unreliable, disorganized, overwhelmed, talented, creative, hardworking. I want you to take a second and think about this person. How do they come across to you? What stands out? Maybe they seem scattered or difficult to work with, or like someone who has potential but just isn't quite getting there, right? And I also want you to like flip the script for a moment. Imagine reading that about yourself, right? If you sat in that for a moment, what would it feel like as a student to read that description? Now I'm going to share a description of another kiddo in the same class. This student is hardworking, creative, talented, overwhelmed, disorganized, and unreliable. So the second student is hardworking, creative, talented, overwhelmed, disorganized, and unreliable. What do you think now? How does this person feel to you? Perhaps you feel like this person would be a better student, right? Maybe they're more likely to stick with a task and get things done. Are you ready for the big aha? It's the same words. I use the same 6 words, no changes, just different order. Okay. And I want you to notice how your perception might shift, right? It's fascinating. The words are the same, but by starting with a positive trait, the person seems capable. When we start with a challenge, they seem unreliable and scattered right from the start. And this exercise highlights the importance of framing, right? It's not just about the words that we use, but the way that we use them. And whether we're talking about how we describe a student or ourselves, framing makes all the difference. And I want you to imagine how this might play out in your own life, right? Helping students that you work with or helping your own children, right? Can we bring attention first to the strengths and then work from there? Because it changes everything. Same student, two descriptions, two different feelings, and two different pathways. So when we talk about twice exceptional kids, it's really easy to get caught up in the challenges, right? They scream loud, right? They often they're most in our face. But if we flip that and we start with the strengths, we're going to really help our students make a transformation. Okay. So now we see the importance of strengths, and we have this question, well, what then does a strength-based and talent-focused life look like? Now, there's a book that speaks to this, and I feel like this really offers the perfect framework for our students and ourselves to understand our strengths. So I'm going to dive into that right now. The concept of the zone of genius and the 4 quadrants that Gay Hendricks lays out in his book called The Big Leap can offer us clarity here. According to the author, when we are struggling in life, it's because we're simply not aligned with our strength areas. So as I go through these, I want you to think about both yourself and your students, kiddos, etc. Our first area is our zone of incompetence, right? And this involves just things that you're bad at, right? Things that you're just better, other people are better than you, right? And these are our struggle areas. For me, this is like data entry, spreadsheets, like taxes. You don't want me doing that stuff, right? It's just not my strength. And the goal here is to minimize our time in this quadrant and elevate, right? Go to the next zone. Our second zone is our zone of competence. These are essentially the things that we're no better or worse than anyone, but we're not necessarily like good or exceptional or above average even. The idea here is that, you can get by, but you're perhaps mediocre here, right? And the goal is to, again, move out of this zone because we're more likely to suffer from burnout. These are things that don't energize or satisfy us, okay? And I want, again, you're thinking about yourself and your students. What are the ways in which your students might experience like they're so-so, but they burn out or they're way out of their comfort zone and they're struggling? This brings us then over to our third zone. And I want to talk to you, but quite frankly, I've done different trainings and things where people actually kind of cry here, pretty emotional. This third zone, the zone of excellence, involves things that you excel in, but, and there's a but, they don't fill you up. Okay? You're highly skilled in these areas. You deliver results and value to others, and maybe you can achieve great success here. Many people get recognition and stay here professionally, but it does not fill you up, right? You are not satisfied. You are unfulfilled. Many successful people operate in this zone, offering value, helping others, not tapping into their inner genius and not living that fulfilling life. Okay, so if this is you, I want to encourage you to think about this. And if this is your students and you feel like maybe they're getting stuck, maybe they got promoted to do something or they're doing something because they're good at it, but it drains them. Then we have our leap to our zone of genius, hence the title of the book, The Big Leap, right? And the zone of genius, you might have heard before, this could be considered your strength or your talents or your passions. This is a space where you are in the flow zone, right? You are in the zone. This is where bliss, happens. We lose track of time. When you operate in this space, you don't just perform well, but you enjoy a sense of fulfillment, right? Of self-actualization. You're in a place where when you make this big leap into this zone, that we're experiencing sort of the ultimate levels of living, of love, of abundance, of creativity and contribution, right? So again, why bring this up? Because this is most probably what brought you here today, right? You're trying to help your students make their big leaps. It's also supremely important that we focus on this for ourselves so that we can better use our strengths to support our students, right? So I'm going to ask you to pause here. We have a little turn and talk activity. You can do this with someone near you if you're watching with someone else, or if you have a friend who's watching this presentation, you can message them, or you can just reflect on it yourself. But I want you to go through the 4 quadrants, and I'll bring them back on the screen. And I want you to take a moment and think about what's your zone of incompetence, what's your zone of competency, what's your zone of excellence, and what's your zone of genius. And then I want you to think back to maybe a student, maybe someone else other than you, and think maybe run them through the same. So let me go back here for a moment, and then I'm going to ask you to pause here and reflect. Okay, once you're back, we left off here, and I want to have you reflect. So whether you were able to come up with all 4 of these, I want you to notice 2 things. Number one, when we focus on our zone of incompetence, did you notice a body language change? A lot of the times we kind of shrink and feel sort of lousy, or maybe we just kind of reverberates through us. And when you notice your zone of genius, you might have postured up a bit, maybe puffed out your chest, right? There's a sense of actually like a full body takeover when we're in these different struggle areas or strength areas. And this poses a really challenging question, right? If we know we have zones of genius, and we know that we can live these strength and talent focused lives, then how do we identify strengths? And then subsequently, how do we develop them, right? How do we identify them in ourselves and our students? And then how do we develop them and help our students to lead these lives? And that, my friends, brings us over to the second part of our presentation, right? Finding hidden potential. How does one do this? So to pre-frame this, before we walk into this next thread of the conversation, I want you to take a moment. When we're entering this space, I want you to enter as a detective and not a judge, okay? I ask you to fact find, to find clues, but not to judge, right? We are gathering data, taking notes. We are not judging, is this a good strength? Is it a valid strength? Is it going to serve them well, right? We are simply collecting data and finding information. Okay, this is supremely important. So I want to make sure that you take this seriously. Okay, and now in exploring strengths and how we might find them, there are dual benefits, right? There's, of course, bringing awareness to the educator or a parent or a professional, right? This is going to help you help students. There's also that bonus benefit before from we talked about like reading the profile of the strong kid or the strong description of Winston Churchill, bringing awareness to the student, right? We know where our mind goes, our attention flows, right? So if we are told that we're good and we believe that we're good, we will become good, we'll become better, we'll become strong, and so forth. Okay. So just like measuring learning for my teachers in the room, we have multiple ways that we can assess strengths. And we're going to look at 3 main buckets. Number 1, sort of informal, ongoing assessments or observations. Okay. Number 2, varying degrees of more formal assessments. And number 3, exposure to enriching experiences and observation. Okay, let's dive into the first one. So our first group here is our informal ongoing assessments. As my colleague, Dr. Jade Rivera says, the best place to start is that we must ask adults and observe students. We must ask adults and observe students. So first thing we can do here is we can connect and leverage the other various adults and professionals in our students' life, right? Maybe teachers, educational therapists, parents, mentors, coaches, etc. And the goal is to get various perspectives, right, for our student across the interest range. And this is really important because the same student, like the Winston Churchill example, might be really asynchronous. Maybe a math teacher might say they're stubborn or lazy. And a track coach might say they're a rock star, superstar, right? An English teacher might say they are deeply in touch with their empathy and emotions and highly expressive, right? Same student, different perspective. So we start with these questions. We first train our attention on what are adults and ourselves seeing, right? What do they love? And just some examples here. What do they love? Perhaps Lego, mythology, performing arts, anime, puzzles, right? Whatever it might be. We then take these observations. This is what they're expressing, what we're seeing they love. Then we might extrapolate that. What are they good at? Okay. Or what might they be good at? We might have to guess because we might not have seen evidence of it ourselves. So we start to bring in our own observations. We watch ourselves, and then we take the observations of other adults, right? And we do our best to observe, and then we do the combination, right? We ask and observe, right? Ask adults, observe students. We ask and observe adults and students. So what we do is we take the two and we sort of rectify them, right? What do we notice from ourselves? What do we notice from others are saying? And then what do we put together and can we arrive at our own conclusions, right? And we can then take this and extrapolate, right? We can make guesses or even have data to suggest what our students are good at. So we're starting to tap into from their interests to their strengths. Okay. For example, a student who is interested in Lego might be highly verbal or visual, or maybe instruct others well and be a leader. Right? A student who's interested in mythology might be an excellent reader. Right? A student in performing arts might be incredibly empathetic, and so on. Right? It's at this special intersection that we develop an understanding of who our students are and what motivates them or what calls to them. In other words, in what domains are they showing above average abilities? And then what can we do with it? So we're sort of taking this detective approach, we're fact finding, and it's our job to then help our students have awareness around this as well. Is anybody familiar with the Ikigai? Ikigai? This is a Japanese concept. It's a Venn diagram, and it's got four spheres. You have all these different domains on the outside. We're primarily focused on this side today, but we have the what do you love? What are you good at? What can you be paid for? And what does the world need? Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with this Ikigai, this center part means reason for being. Okay. And it's really the perfect diagram because it's helping us find that intersection, right? And by way of example, we don't always know these things when we're young, but we can start to help our students reflect on them. Like if you asked me, 12-year-old me, were you going to start a virtual village that helps twice exceptional students and gifted students through enrichment learning to make friends all over the world via the internet? I wouldn't have been able to tell you that, right? I thought I was going to be a teacher and it would stop there. But that then led to other things, right? Other elements. What am I good at? And what do I love? Started to interact with the changing needs of the world in the midst of a pandemic, right? So I got here due to a variety of different things. And the intersection of them is my Ikigai. The intersection of them is what mentors help me to achieve, right? And this framework is simply serves as the best way for us to help our kids look further down the road. And it offers a visual for them to find that space that aligns with their strengths, that aligns with their interests, that they may contribute to the world in meaningful ways, that they may, and again, we're not judging, we don't know if they're going to contribute. They might be supremely interested in Minecraft or bananas or electrical wiring, right? Chimpanzees. It doesn't matter. It's not up for us to say. But what we do know is that the society that we live in really celebrates experts, right? And often education does not. And I'm going to give you a very palatable example. If thinking of medicine, right? Who is considered to be more of an expert, right? You have a general physician, like a general practitioner, maybe pediatric, or a specialist, right? Ear, nose, throat specialist, right? A lot of times our general practitioner is someone who's well-rounded in the field of medicine, and then they refer out an orthopedist, right? A dermatologist. If you have a kiddo who's going to be specialized in some space, then we need to encourage that, right? So let me give you another question. I'm a firm believer that we can't sit too long. So I want to encourage you to pause and reflect after this. And again, if you're with someone, if you know someone going through this presentation, then do it with them. If you're going solo, then take a moment and just be in these thoughts. First, it says reflect, okay? Just make your own observations here. Thinking of the thoughts that you have, observations of a student, maybe it's your own child or students that you work with, and bring in the observations of others, maybe what others have said. And I want you to go through the same steps. What are they good at? Linked to what do they love? So we start with what do they love? And then we start to extrapolate. Maybe we have evidence of what they're good at or what could they be good at? Okay, I want you to start there, just like you saw moments ago, right? With this, what do they love? What are they good at? And then I want you to take a moment and then see if there's an aha as you connect these. Maybe the first time you've ever made one of these connections. So let's go ahead and hit pause here. And I want you to go back to this and think, what do they love and what are they good at? Okay, and welcome back. So if you just took maybe you had a first time aha, maybe you're like, oh, I never realized that that person is supremely highly verbal, right? Or an incredible critical thinker, or they are actually a natural born leader, so creative, right? Whatever it might be. If you had an aha, I want you to take a moment and write that down when you work with a student, whether it's your kid or someone else's. Take a moment and write that down because that's going to inform the way that you show up for this kiddo. And I'm going to share a resource with you later that you can use with your clients and your kiddos to help them focus on their strengths and talent. So let's keep going. Okay, exploring our second group here. This is our more formal way to assess. And this is kind of a continuum, right? On the one hand of the continuum, we have things like a neuropsych assessment, right? A neuropsych evaluation, neuropsychological evaluation, if you're not familiar with that. And this is where we get, formal diagnoses. We have IQ testing and so forth. And just a quick pro tip. Number one, we want to find neuropsychologists who are strength-based, who are looking for the strengths in our students and looking to help them identify them. Number two, you can go through a neuropsych assessment that can be quite lengthy and highlight all of the strengths and condense those down for the student, right? Move aside all the other business. Another quick tip here is you can also ask the neuropsych if you're in conversation with them while they're processing it, especially if you're the parent who's ordering it. You can ask a neuropsych to shorten those reports and say, I want three pages, right? And I want you to focus primarily on strengths. And then we can share that with, school district, with teachers, with professionals, with coaches, etc. We also, in the middle, less formal, we have our things like, trait tests, right? Things like Myers-Briggs and so forth, right? And then we have sort of our online other kinds of profilers, and they range in validity and so forth. That's another conversation. Just three quick thoughts when you're choosing an assessment, when you're assessing an assessment. It's important that we understand, number one, the goal, right? What is the intent of this instrument? Number two, what does the research say? Is this backed up by what other people are supporting? Is this sound? Is it legit? And then number three, we must make sure that the tools focus on the strengths, right? Is it strength based? Like we've been talking about the whole time. I'm going to give you a concrete one that you can use. I'm not affiliated with them, but I used to work at Bridges, and I went through the Bridges Graduate School. So there's a strength-based assessment lab at Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity, is now led by a close colleague and good friend of mine, Dr. Jade Rivera, who I referenced earlier. And this is really built on the back of Dr. Susan Baum and Dr. Robin Schrader's work, the suite of tools. So this is a way, it's not quite as formal as a neuropsych assessment. It's not diagnosing, right? It's not medical, but it can allow a student to have sort of an interest profile where they can learn more about themselves, and then this can be shared out with educators and teams to help a student to make a strength-based leap forward. Okay, so just a quick little share there for a concrete resource. Now we're going to go to our third group, which is exposing to enriching experiences. One way to help our students to identify and explore their own strengths is exposure, right? We expose and we observe. So one of the best things that we can do, simply put them in front of a bunch of different exploratory activities and then observe, right? We give them a bunch and we observe. And this form of assessment can be treated kind of like a naturalistic observation, sort of watching them in their element, taking notes and looking to connect dots, right? And it's our job to give them as many opportunities as possible. Now, when we talk about this sort of deep, meaningful enrichment, we're going to get into Renzulli's enrichment and triad model. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but I want you just to focus on this part for now. I'm going to explain the other two later. The first step is called type 1 enrichment. And the idea behind this is designed to help students be exposed to a wide variety of disciplines, things that are not usually covered in the traditional classroom. Topics, occupations, hobbies, people, places, events, things that are usually left out of ordinary curriculum through dedicated time to explore. Okay. And it's our job to let this be the entry point into where they start to lean into their strengths and discover more about themselves. I call this the spaghetti approach, right? We're throwing it all against the wall and seeing what sticks. Okay. So we're exposing students to all kinds of things and we're seeing what sticks. We're not judging, we're just watching. And we're giving them opportunities that are maybe beyond their age or out of their zip code, whatever it might be. And that can be virtual opportunities, it can be in-person opportunities, but we're seeing what sticks. So by now, we've talked about these kind of three ways to identify strengths. We have informal, ongoing observations, or watching and pulling in other professionals to watch, other adults. Number two, we have the varying degrees of the formal assessments, right? Going from neuropsych assessments to Myers-Briggs type trait models to the online profilers. and in-person profilers. And then we have our exposure, our spaghetti method, right? Where we're looking to see what works. And at this point, you're probably asking yourself, okay, but what do we do once we've found said strengths, right? Where do we go from here? Well, my friends, that brings us to the third part of our presentation, empowering beyond the classroom, developing strengths and talents. Now it's time to roll up our sleeves. Okay, so in the development of strengths, we're going to essentially explore two different buckets. Number one, we're going to talk about in the classroom, and then number two, we're going to talk about beyond the classroom, outside the classroom. Okay, so I'm going to talk to my teachers and classroom leaders first, and I'm going to be listing out some concrete tips. Right? Those of you who have been looking for some really actionable advice, this is a good opportunity for you to take notes. And whether or not you're a teacher, some of this will still apply. And then beyond this part will be the stuff that will be even more applicable. So number one, we have to let go. And there's really two ways that we must let go. We must let go of the what we think education should look like, and we must let go of the how things get done. Okay, so we're going to start with the what. As the late Sir Ken Robinson said, maybe you've seen his famous TED Talk or read a book, we all have had an education, and therefore we all have an opinion about one, right? And you may be holding on to how things were done for you. And I want you to recognize and identify that and then check that, right? Learning is less about what we think kids should know and more about equipping them with the tools to learn and create. So it's less about like how, this must be like the way I did it. And it's more about setting them up for success. And I want you to think, if those of you, maybe if you're familiar or not familiar with Joseph Campbell's seminal work, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, the hero is called, right? Whether it be, fill in the blank story, Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, right? Whoever it might be, the hero is called and they must meet a mentor, right? They have to meet a mentor, and the mentor is you. We are not the hero. Sorry. It's our job to let go of our past journey and to help our hero cross the threshold and go on this meaningful journey, and they come back a transformed person, right? And I share this with you again as a moment to reflect on your own beliefs and how your education may have been, and remember your role now, right? Which is that times are changing, things are changing, and it's our job to help our students to go on their own journeys. Quick little story here. I used to teach history and a bunch of different electives, right? So it shouldn't surprise you that I left teaching and started an enrichment center where we do, strength-based electives. And I was a good teacher, but I was great with electives. Again, no surprises where I went. My future was clear. The feedback that I would always get, though, drove me nuts. Okay, I would always bump into Dr. Susan Baum, the author before it was connected with my old school, and she would always praise me for the work in the electives. And it drove me nuts because my identity, I was like, I'm a history teacher, darn it. And I would always get praise for the elective work that I was doing. And I realized something one day. I kind of had this aha, like we were doing something really important that I want you to think about, which is that we weren't learning the way that we thought learning should be. We were solving problems, right? We were solving authentic problems. And I realized that those enrichment classes were more important than the stuff I was teaching in history, because I was teaching students how to think critically, right? How to do the things they were uniquely talented and interested in. And you see, perhaps most important of all, I had taken history classes before, but I hadn't taken automotive, right? Here's an example of a 1956 Chevy pickup truck that I bought and thought, let me restore it with some students. And we got a write-up in a magazine about it. The idea is that I felt supremely like I should just step aside and let the learning happen. I should be more of a mentor rather than a teacher. I hadn't taken these classes, so I was a better teacher, if that makes sense. Put even better by Dr. Susan Baum, the goal is to be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage, right? The goal is to step aside and let learning happen. Let go of what we think it should look like. All right, let's move on. So the second thing that we must let go of is the how. We have to let go of how we think things ought to be done. We must focus instead on the big ideas. Let go of how they come to pass. And I like to say we must be a differentiation yogi, right? Our goal is to give our students agency. And there's different entry points for that, right? We can use things like the multiple intelligences. And we know the multiple intelligences are definitely overused and misused. But they can be helpful, right? Helping a student realize if they're logical, mathematical, or visual, or verbal, or interpersonal, right? Helping them identify that they have certain strengths can be supremely beneficial. As well, we have the zone of proximal development, the ZPD. This is where we find the scaffolding, right? I want you to think about when you first rode a bicycle, if you've had that experience. At first you had training wheels, and then we went up and the training wheels were off and your parents held on. And then eventually you look back and they had let go, right? And you were riding by yourself. This is the idea that, we want to make sure that the support is in place. The hand is there. The training wheels are there. We don't want it to be too easy. We also don't want it to be too hard so they give up, right? So we're finding the sweet spot where a gradual release of responsibility. In terms of creating meaningful content and meaningful lessons for our students, I like to use the acronym INCUP. This is created by Dr. William Dodson's work. Sorry, not Dr. William Dodson's work, the psychologist who talked about the ingredients for ADHD students to really access meaningful learning, right? And I think this is so helpful because it helps us shift away from thinking of like how a lesson should go and focus more on what are the ingredients, right? A good chef doesn't need a recipe, right? They just bring in the ingredients to the right level. So we know I is for interest. Okay, we have our interest. Then we have our N, novelty. Is it new and exciting? So is it interesting? Is it exciting? C is challenging. Is this something that's going to make me sweat a little bit? Is it something I'm going to have to work for, right? Why do kids love video games? Because they have all of these things. Is it urgent? Does it feel pressing? I must do this soon. There's a real life deadline. This is going to be published on a website. And then P, passion and play, right? Can I bring in things that I'm uniquely passionate about and can I make it fun and maybe gamified, right? Again, this is less of us saying this is how it ought to be done and more of a checklist of ingredients, ensuring that we are making the right learning happen, however it looks. Okay, so one more strategy again for my teachers is I just want to show you this. When we think about differentiating and supporting our students, there are really 4 domains. It's called CPPE. And when we look at these different domains, you'll see that we have first content, right? This is the stuff that we are teaching, right? The material that we're teaching. Then we have the process by way they learn. How do they learn? Are they reading? Are they, podcasts, YouTube videos? Then we have the product. What are they producing to prove to us that they have learned? Is this worksheets, quizzes, essays, a role play, a dramatization, building something, a debate, etc.? And then the environment. Where are they learning? And this is supremely important for our twice exceptional students. They are highly sensitive to both big feelings and also environmental stimuli. So sometimes having a kiddo, I didn't realize this about myself. I have dyslexia and ADHD. And I spent most of my life just struggling to get things done in public places. And it wasn't until I realized I kind of need to sequester myself and listen to high vibration, euphoric music to get in the zone, right? That helps me. So it's really important to help bring this kind of awareness to how are we creating learning environments and how are we teaching? How are we delivering the content and what are we asking to see? Okay, these are supremely important. Just to give you a concrete example of a differentiated product, instead of having a quiz or an essay, here's an example of something from one of our World War I classes where the students have the opportunity, again, using that CPPE, we're talking about product here. They need to show us they learned a certain thing, and they're going to pick 3, right? It's tic-tac-toe. This is even a higher level way to learn, right? They can choose, do I want to, do something that aligns with what I'm interested in, which is, political cartooning or a newspaper or a podcast or making a primary document. Whatever it might be, right? We're granting our students opportunities to go through. And this is just one example, right? To go even higher level, we want to think of, well, what's the way that we macro plan our curriculum? What's the way that we even plan a whole entire unit? And my favorite framework, if you've heard of this before, Carol Thompson's Understanding by Design. Understanding by Design offers a far more flexible way for curriculum planning. It allows us to completely let go of the how, because it focuses more on big ideas, right? We start here instead of, and I know teachers, you start with, you're like, I have this great worksheet, I have this great lesson, right? I don't want to let it go. No, this is the opposite of that. I know it's hard. Trust me, I struggle with this too. What are the desired results? Where must they end? One of my favorite philosophy professors once said, living a good life is about dying an ecstatic death, right? Go all the way to the end, design what it looks like, and then plan backward to get there, right? We must figure out what are the desired results? Where do we want our students to end? What kind of person do they want to be? What kind of things have they learned? Then, how will we know that they have accomplished it? What is the evidence that they have done what we intend for them to do? Next, what's the stuff that they have to do to get there, right? And we can let go here. We can say, hey, here's a video playlist, some documentaries, here's some books to read, here's some podcasts to listen to. We can let go of how they learn it. Here's a historian that you can meet with, right? Different journeys ending up in the same place. It's our job to support. And again, this is great for life design too. How do you want to get this job? That's your result. How are you going to get there? So this brings us to dual differentiation, right? We have these complex twice exceptional students. Remember, twice exceptional students look like this: strengths, struggles. So we need to make sure that we're supporting both. We need to differentiate for their special talents. This can be acceleration, curriculum compacting, bringing in their interest into the classroom and allowing them to go deep. Okay. We must also focus on the struggle areas, right? Remember before we talked about yellow and we talked about the blue. You see right next to me. Oh, wrong side over here. We want to make sure that we're accommodating our students and supporting them so that they can also grow in areas that they might be lagging. Because remember, they're always green, right? So we need to make sure that we're supporting. And this concept is dual differentiation. We're supporting them in both places at the same time. We're not focused primarily on remediating. We're focused on accelerating in strength areas and then helping support struggle areas. Okay. These are the steps forward. Okay. And then one other little thought here for my teachers is the importance of having routines. Okay. Having routine space, routine opportunities to consistently dedicate time to strength exploration. Okay, why? Because teachers, you get busy, and strength development is often the first thing we cut. So the solution is to have healthy routines. Every Wednesday, every Friday, for the first half of class, we are focusing on your passion project, right? This is the inroad to the content you want to learn. They're supremely interested in World War I. You're teaching a unit on the 20th century. Let them go deep on that all year. They're going to learn so much about the future, about the past. What led to this? What did it lead to, right? They have to go further, and they're going deep. So we want to encourage our students to try different things, and we want to find creative inroads all around their interests and strengths. And we want to have committed space to create opportunities for individual and group work to develop. Okay, a couple concrete ones. I want to give you some stuff you can use. Some of my favorites here, and they're not all on here, of course, but things like starting with a focus question. Starting class with a big question. Maybe it's that big idea that you have that you're trying to get at. Ask right away. When you start a new unit, maybe you do a know, want to know, learn chart or an inquiry concept map. You're getting an idea of what do they know? What do they care about? Can you make the content relevant to them? And then at the end, you're assessing them. What'd you learn? Hey, we started here. We had these questions. Did we answer all of them? Maybe we need to spend more time. And then, of course, Socratic seminars, right? Having our students go deep. What is preparing students for university look like? This, helping our students understand reading primary text documents, having arguments and discussions and dialogue based on citations from a singular text that rooted in, right? Maybe taking a stand, having four-corner debates, having authentic projects that our kids are working on, right? I don't know about you, but the things that I remember from school when I was young were the times I took a stand, or the times I created something, right? Also, feedback circles. Can we model the workspace? Can we allow our students to share problems that they have and get support? And can we allow constructive criticism after presentations and iterations are shared? Okay, so one more little turn and talk activity here. Again, if you're with someone, great, you can do it. If not, if you're solo, that's totally fine too. After exploring different ideas about finding inroads and routines to help our students focus on their strengths, what are some of the top ideas percolating in your mind? What are some of the top, whether you're a parent, whether you're an ed therapist working one-to-one, or some other kind of educational professional or specialist, whether you are a classroom teacher, what are the top ideas that you have? I want you to take a moment and capture these, write them down, voice record them so that you can access them later when it matters. Okay, and then if you're with someone, you can share them. So hit pause here, and then we're going to move on. Okay, now the fun stuff. We're going to go to developing talents, right? So before we talked about in the classroom, now we're talking about developing talents outside the classroom. So this is pretty straightforward. I like to say our job is to find what they love, find where they can get more of it, find mentors who will help them get there, and then find people like them so they can build relationships around their interests, right? I like to break these basic steps down into 3 C's. I'm going to walk you through those right now. Okay. Our first C, and this is a framework that I've created. These are the 3 pillars to Young Scholars Academy, our virtual enrichment village. Our first C is captivating, accelerated, unique content, right? Our students have these young bodies and these older brains, right? They need accelerated, captivating content that's not available to them due to their age. Maybe they're absolutely, really so into like AI coding or Python programming or whatever it might be. We need to give them the stuff that they would do outside of school on the side and then bring it into the forefront, whatever program we're creating, whether it's like at home, in an enrichment class, in a club, something outside of school. The second one is community. Can we find really quirky spaces where these kids hang out, where they're going to be with like-minded peers, right? Our kids struggle with neurotypical kids. So we need to give them opportunities to be together. And where are they going to be together? They're going to be together in, again, enrichment programs, in debate clubs, in Model United Nations, in robotics, right? These kinds of places, they're going to congregate around their interests and they're going to experience more belonging, better positive self-image and self-affect. And then we have our third C, which is mentors. Now, mentors are key. We already saw that circle from Joseph Campbell. We need adults who can look to our kids and, sorry, parents, but it can't be you. We need someone else. You can say something until you're blue in the face, but someone else says it once and they listen. We need to have adults who can be content experts, who can help our kid and say, hey, kid, I've been there. It's tough. I'm going to help you, right? That is the kind of opportunity that you can really help and start to incubate talents and really develop strengths. So going to give you some concrete tips here. Number one, again, that college level content. We need to have a failure-friendly environment. So the key here is to make it authentic and aligned with their vision. Just like we did with the understanding by design, planning backward, we need to help our students focus on what they're interested in and then have authentic opportunities. Build websites, write a government official, create an invention, launch a podcast, right? We know our asynchronous kiddos have these really big brains that crave so much more than busy work, right? These students have often limited opportunities because of their age, right? This student who's 8 years old, who knows everything there is to know about the combustion engine, can't take the automotive shop at the community college because they're 8 years old. So we need to find opportunities for them to explore these talents because this is a critical time in their lives to do so, right? So, and even worse, sometimes schools, well-intended schools, will take away an elective because a student is struggling in a main class, right? I mean, you have a student who's obsessed with art, right? But they take them out of art and put them in a math remediation class because they're struggling in math. That's like taking oxygen away from someone and saying, you can breathe later, right? We need to provide space for our kids to go deep. We need it to be exciting. We need it to be enriching. We need it to be high level. And we know that this is exponential. The earlier you do this, right, the further they go, the better they feel, the deeper the talent, the stronger the strengths. Right. One of the primary goals that drove me to found Young Scholars Academy. I had this aha. I thought one day, I just thought, what if 5-year-olds could take college classes? You know, what if I started a program where a 5-year-old could take mythology or psychology, right? Or a 5-year-old could do a hands-on chemistry class, right? Wow. Because what's more entertaining, right? Is it history class or is it like women in World War I, right? The latter. And so why not have these opportunities? Why not? We can't gatekeep and withhold. We have to make sure these kids have this early because, again, their brains need it. Okay. Now, earlier we were talking about this Renzulli model, and I talked about the first part here, right? Type 1. Type 1, again, is exposure, right? Helping our kids have novel learning experiences. Now, the next parts will help us develop these talents. So, and this is taken right from our website here. Again, type 1 enrichment. Type 2 enrichment, this is the part where the students focus on what they're already good at and passionate about. They learned in the first part, and now they're going to learn more. They're going to become mini experts, right? They're going to have mentors, special talent development opportunities, maybe taking part in competitions, having some kind of authentic public-facing thing like a website they make or a lecture they go to or something like that, right? They're following their interests. And then the third part, this is about connecting the students to the real world, right? So now they've developed the strength and talent. Now we're trying to get them to maybe work with professionals or organizations. Perhaps they get an internship or an apprenticeship, or they do a community project, or they audit a community college class, or they start an organization, right? This is where they're taking the stuff that they explored, they've developed it, and now they're applying it, right? And this is the true authenticity. And I want to share something with you really quickly and give you sort of a concrete example of what this looks like. I'm going to give you a quick little case study. At Young Scholars Academy, we have a program called Fellowship. It's called Passion Project Pursuit, or Young Scholars Academy Fellowship Pursuing Passion Projects. And the idea is this is a class dedicated primarily to project ideation, exploration, and execution, right? We take these students who have these big, curious brains, they have such big hopes and aspirations, and they might struggle with the executive function skills, the doing skills, to implement them, right? So we help them go from dreaming to doing, and they get to work with an expert mentor over the course of 40 weeks, and it culminates in a student symposium, right? It culminates with something authentic. They're sort of defending their work and presenting it. We've had students create solar ovens or launch satirical products or learn programming languages or write books, etc. And I wanted to share a little snippet from one of these, the satirical product launch. So last year, one of our seniors created a satirical product line called Human Food, and to sort of satirize capitalism, right? Specifically criticizing marketing efforts in a really macro way, which I thought was so brilliant. And I've always been a firm believer, maybe you feel the same, that humor is one of the highest forms of intelligence, especially satire, right? Someone's ability to connect certain dots and make observations and call to attention or give a name to something that everybody else knows or wants or sees. So I'm going to show you a little slide from his pitch deck. Okay, you can see a close examination shows this really fantastic sense of humor, right? Human food, part of a balanced food time. And then you have these really funny, like kind of Mad Lib type fill in the blank bits where he's inserted with brackets, a lot of satire, right? And taking not so subtle commentary about global warming or the state of humanity or nutrition or consumerism, right? Science and math. You have this little disclaimer down here criticizing corporate protections, right? That they're not responsible for the only thing they're doing. So on the journey to do this student wanted to create a product line, right? So he actually learned all kinds of things about marketing, manufacturing, business operations, graphic design, and he even learned how to use Blender to create videos, which is something that was a goal for him all along the way. So I'm going to share this with you quickly. I'm going to play a little video for you so you can see, again, the student completely animated this for his project. So I'm going to play here and you can have a look, and there's no sound, so I'm going to talk over it. But you can see he's made a laser etcher, right? A laser that's going to cut out the box. And you'll notice something really cool is, again, the student's capacity to bring this to life. The laser is going to turn into a suction cup right here, and it's going to pull the box off and drop it. And then the whole rotation goes and it starts with another one, right? Now, why is this such a big deal? Because again, we have a student who's conceived of something, right, in his mind's eye, and has created something that he saw, right? His brilliant, autistic, very visual brain saw this idea and then thought it would be an important part of developing his satirical product, right? And there's one key element that it takes to get here that we haven't spoken about yet. And that key element is failure. Okay. To accomplish this level of strength exploration, to have 40 weeks of dedicated time with a mentor to develop a passion project that a kid dreams of, it takes a failure-friendly environment, right? It's imperative that we allow our students to fail and fail often, because it's imperative that we fail on the way to success, right? Most people who are supremely successful just got over failing and failed a lot, right? So I think it's important to create environments where our students learn how to fail, because look, school usually gets this wrong. Many of our kids are scarred because they can't take risks, they can't step out of line, they can't try new things. Yet our society demands that novelty, different thinking, all different perspectives, right? Grades can crush that. And so it's really important that we inadvertently, bring awareness to, we want more divergent thinking, more exploration. And again, I know this is controversial, but one of the best ways to find strengths is to fail, right? Our example of Winston Churchill, right, from before, and maybe an even better example, the Wright brothers, right? It's been said that the Wright brothers would, crash a plane 5 times before they came home for dinner, right? You talk about the ability to get back in the saddle, that stick-with-itness, that almost rigidity, right? Could be seen as a flaw or a strength, but ultimately it's a strength that allowed them to master the art of flight, master the skies, right? That's so important. And I think put even better by Nelson Mandela, the late Nelson Mandela, I can't lose, I either win or learn, right? Wow. I can't lose, I either win or learn. This is such an important line that we can help our students start to believe in, and we have to believe in ourselves. Does anybody know the most dangerous phrase in the English language, by the way? This is a phrase that kills ideas and crushes new thinking. This is the way things have always been done, right? This is the way things have always been done. This squashes our confidence. Okay. I was very fortunate to grow up in a house where my late father always encouraged me to take risks. He romanticized Babe Ruth, and he would say, Sam, Babe Ruth struck out more than anybody else, but nobody remembers that. Why? Because when he connected with the ball, he hit the best home runs, right? And people only remember the home runs. They don't remember the strikeouts. And I always kind of internalize that, right? No, I'm not saying we want students to be like cavalier risk takers who are, gamblers and whatnot, but we want them to be able to be innovators and not afraid to truly apply themselves. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. We have an enrichment program with over 350 students, and it is our collective dream to help them explore develop their strengths, develop their talents, and do it in a safe space. So I'm going to play a quick video for you from one of our parents next to his kiddo. And I want you to pay careful attention to when the dad says, yes, and. He's going to highlight this here. Let me go ahead and jump in here. How about you?
I think it's his ability to go deep, right? And not be in an environment that is triggering, in an environment that's nurturing and supportive of that subject matter. Learning about the history of warfare, that could be a really triggering and really heavy subject, but you guys do it with such a plum. He comes out energized. I think that's another common theme that we're hearing, is that there's a level of energizing that happens here with Wolf and with the students. I think it goes back to that feeling of being heard, definitely the yes and. So I think all that positivity just really catapults through the rest of his day. He comes off of the calls, and if he was having a bad day before that, he is having a great day for the rest of the day and into the next day. So
Okay, so I just want to capture that again. This dad is saying that, the student is told, he's told yes and, right? He's told that he's allowed to think differently and he's allowed to explore things that might not be usually taught at his age, but it's done so in a way that's delicate and approaches, sort of insulating him to some extent, but also allowing him to fail, right? Yes, and you try something, well, it's not necessarily right, but we're not going to say no to you. Let's explore it and see where it goes, right? And that's one of these key benefits, because when we can identify these strengths, we can help these kids. This dad said at the end of the video that he's euphoric, right? He is so feeling good when he gets off the lesson and into the next day, right? It's such an important feeling. I'm going to give you a concrete phrase here that we can use to help our students kind of step into a new role, right? They're able to take risks when they feel like they're part of something. And I like to use the phrase, I am a blank and we blank. Okay, I am a blank and we blank. For example, I'm an entrepreneur and we challenge the status quo. Or I am an engineer and we innovate. I am a carpenter, right? And we finish, right? The phrase is helping students feel like they belong to a particular group, something that's bigger than themselves. And again, these are exponential changes that we can make, because we're helping our students feel like their strength aligns with the group identity, and that group is making progress towards a certain value or a certain goal. Okay, so last little turn and talk activity here for you. Again, whether you're with someone, you can do it with them or you can do it solo. But I want you to reflect on a student you've worked with, or perhaps your own kiddo. Maybe they've taken on a new identity as a result of, being appointed like a new role, maybe having a job, or, being a leader of a club, right? Or being a part of a team. And I want you to think, how has this role or title changed the way they feel about themselves? And how has it changed the way that maybe others see them? Okay. So think about that again. I want you to pick a student who's maybe taken on a new identity as a result of, maybe being appointed or having a reflection. How has it changed the way they see themselves, and how has it changed the way that others see them? And if you can't think of anyone in particular, perhaps you think about yourself, or maybe someone who might benefit from this. Okay. So pause here. And then when you're done, let's come back. Okay, welcome back. So again, this is a really powerful phrase. If you have someone, it can be transformative to be appointed to a certain level of I am a blank and we blank. Okay, so let's keep going. A couple more tips for you here. We mentioned this before. It is so very important that our students can find a mentor, right? We know that we need someone who is going to help them. I mentioned this before, but parents, you can say it till you're blue in the face and your kid doesn't listen, but someone else says it once and they do, right? It takes a village. And the greatest teacher is usually someone that your child respects, sees as an expert in an area of interest, and feels seen by. So we must find someone who does that, right? Who loves what your child loves, who can grow with them, who can build a relationship with them, who's clever, quirky, like our kids, right? And mentors them, because mentors are key here. When you have twice exceptional students, and this is like really important, if you're a little distracted, come back to me. Our students often struggle with kids their own age because they have these really spiky profiles, right? They have these old brains and young bodies. So they might not get along with kids their own age because they have very different interests. Adults can look past social quirks and things like that and help the student develop their brain, help the student develop their interests and talents. And that's why mentors are so very important. And it's really important that we find someone, again, in that content area, right? This might be the person that we least expect. Now, I'm just going to give you a personal example. My whole life, I've been obsessed with automobiles. I make totally impractical decisions around cars For example, my daily driver is a 1956 Chevy. It makes no sense. My wife wishes we would get rid of it. Okay. But over the years, I've become friends with tons of mechanics between motorcycles and old cars. I end up hanging out with all of these mechanics who I also think are very twice exceptional, by the way. These are people who like speak engine and maybe struggle to connect with people, right? And I want you to think about the power of a young person being with someone like that. I had the good fortune of meeting someone who's the number one transmission expert for 1956 to 1958 Chevy pickup trucks. And he helped me learn so very much about my own truck and build confidence. And I'm not afraid to take my truck apart when I'm with him because I know it's going to be okay, right? I can try, I can fail, and he's there to help. Our whole entire program at Young Scholars Academy is built around this principle, this experience that I had, right? We call our teachers mentors because we know that they are there to help scores of families, kids to feel seen and take educational risks and grow. Okay. So mentors are everything. And number three, it's so important. Our kids struggle socially. As my favorite, one of my favorite quotes, Dr. Lin Lim Go, one of my colleagues, once said, humans are social creatures who think, not thinking creatures who emote. And we often focus on the opposite, right? We often focus on the logical learning, stuff like that. But this tells us that humans are social creatures first and thinkers second, right? We need to focus on social first. We need to help our students make friends. The number one reason families come to my enrichment program, Young Scholars Academy, is because their students are struggling socially, right? They are not making connections with other kids. And to give you like a very concrete example, we have a kiddo who's 11 years old, now 12 actually. She has like a 179 IQ. That is, to give you a perspective, Einstein was believed to be 165 to 175. Okay. So here she is in this 12-year-old body, young body, 179 IQ brain, right? She's not going to hang out with graduate students who are gifted. She's not going to hang out with other 12-year-olds because they're interested in different stuff. So we need our kids to be with each other. Now, the question, where can you find like-minded friends, right? That's a good question. That's one that I get a lot, right? And the interest areas are the key, right? Where are they interested? Where are people gathering around these interests? And another thought here about socializing is, again, it can be really tough, right? So it's usually easiest when someone can facilitate, maybe having like roles or rules, right? Maybe playing a game, you are going to be the note taker, you're going to be the leader, you are going to be the jester, whatever it might be. Our students usually feel most comfortable when there's a shared task. That's one of the reasons why like classroom learning can be more comfortable than kind of like abstract socializing. So for example, playing something like Dungeons and Dragons, right? You have a different role, you take turns. That can be a great way to socialize. I want to share another thought, improv as well, right? I'm going to show you an email that totally broke me down. This is a prime example of our students having social successes in a structured environment. This is one that a mom sent me, and it gets me every time. She said, Sam, exclamation point, blank met blank today, and oh my word, he found someone with a common interest for the first time in his life. So this is a student who made his first friend in this class. They started talking about the blackest black paint, which is featured on some YouTube channel that they apparently both love. He is so giddy happy. He's like running around smiling. I can't believe I found two friends in this class. Does that not get you? Right? Here's an example of a kid, right, who never made any friends in his whole entire life. He's homeschooled. And now in a class where students are allowed to share their interests, has connected with two kids and become best friends with them. Right? When we're talking about those second and third C's, the community and the mentors, the caring mentors, I want you to just give you a visual here before we start to wrap up. Okay. You might think of these last 2 points as the key axes, like an X and Y axis, right? The X axis is where our students can find other kids like them. They can look left and right and see other kids on their level. And the Y axis, they can look up and they can see adults who are like them who say, it's going to be okay. I've been there, right? You're going to make it. When our asynchronous twice exceptional kids have both of those, this is the environment where they explore captivating college level content, right? Where they start to develop and explore their strengths and where they turn these strengths into talents that allow them to lead meaningful lives. And speaking of environments, just a little reminder, let's go back to where we began, right? Environments are everything, right? Winston Churchill may not have been the strongest student in the classroom. Obviously, his teachers had really ugly things to say about him. And that's unfortunate, and no educator should ever talk like that. He was in his zone of incompetency with teachers who didn't understand him. But when there was an enemy at the gate, when he connected with mentors, when he started to explore his strengths and lead and speak and debate and study history, then he activated his zone of genius. right? And he became the leader who helped Great Britain fend off Nazism and fascism during World War II and beyond, right? And to give you kind of a more modern example, again, take a Simone Biles, right? She has ADHD and perhaps struggled in the classroom. I don't know. But on the mat, the gold speaks for itself, right? Here's someone who is supremely, maybe the best gymnast of all time, right? Same Simone, different environment, different content, different environment, different community of people, different mentors. Okay. So I hope that we can take this as we go. Now, I know this has been a lot. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. Well, it's a lot, right? A lot at once. But I want to wrap up with a little summary, and then I'm going to give you a few things. So let's recap. On our journey, we explored our hidden potential, right? We talked about understanding what twice exceptional means, and we talked about the importance of strengths and talents. We then talked about how can we identify strengths? How does one find strengths? And we looked at these different domains between, formal things like neuropsych, informal things, traits and observations, online profilers. Then we talked about how can we empower our students both in and beyond the classroom to develop strengths and talents. Okay. And before we turn it over to wrap up, I'd like to ask if I can share two things with you. I hope so. So this first one here is a QR code that will take you to the strength-based assessment lab at Bridges. Again, I'm not affiliated or associated with them, but I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's a fantastic resource. And I know the team who is leading this. So if you want to pause here and scan that QR code. And then number two, you have the resource that I created for you. And this is a great resource to help students based on the Big Leap book is to stop struggling and live a strength-based life. And it's a guide to help them identify their different zones and start tapping into their strengths. So I want you all to have a copy. Please, again, scan that QR code and you can grab that resource there. And it will also send some kind of follow-up resources and emails to help you. So it's sort of ongoing, whether you're supporting your own kiddo or student. So I want to leave you with this. At the end of the day, no one cares about deficits, right? So let's do everything that we can to help our students find their strengths, develop them into talents, and lead these meaningful, fulfilling lives where they can make relationships and a sense of purpose. Thank you so much.